Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, June 21st meeting of the Stockbridge Assessors. And whenever you're ready, Mike.
Okay. Last week's minutes, things that are on here were carried over from last week's minutes. I didn't print them. We got the number 2 equalized valuations from the state are done every 2 years. Those came through. I had them printed up, but I didn't bring them with me. We don't have to do anything. They just use our sales from last year to basically do a sales analysis like we do anyway to come up with the equalized valuations for every community. I have them if you want to look at them. They're not that different than what our values are. Equalized values are used for a whole bunch of different things, typically for the amount of money that we get from the state, usually every year, that goes on the tax recap. Ours is not a major amount, but that's what there's other things that they're used for. Again, I forgot to bring them with me, but they're down in the office if you want to look at them. The gate DLS update, I updated the gateway with Doug's election info, and then Terry certified it, so we're all set with that. I also, because I'm the administrator for the town, I created a new account for Jamie as well for as our new selectwoman. Form of list number 4 for the second homeowner study for FY23 were due last Friday. So far, we have a little over 300 back, and we're getting a lot of requests for extensions, which is fine. I mean, typically I won't be looking at Tammy's going to actually be going through those and helping with the study, and she won't be doing that probably until second week in July. So if someone's asking for a request, we're not going to deny it. I mean, we had to give a target date as June 17th because we wanted to have a 60-day time period for people to get them back, but a lot of the times they can't fill them out until they're actually back in their second home, and of which a lot of them are now. So I would assume a lot of them are going to be coming back. But so far, that's not a bad turnout.
So is that enough that the state won't give us a hard time?
Yeah, last reval we had 400 that we used. I would expect we'll get close to that number.
Okay.
So we should have enough for sure. Income and expense statements were due on June 1st. I did get back a whole bunch of the ones that I really, really needed from the Red Lion Inn and Fitzpatrick's, which I do appreciate. And we just got back the big one that we needed, which was for the Glendale Hydro Plant. That came back from the new owners, and that goes now to Roy Bishop, who will be doing our appraisal for that. That was due on Friday, and again, I wasn't here last week on Friday, but it came through right on time, so we do have that. I will be sending.
You mentioned new owners. Who are the new owners of the hydro plant?
It's Hitchcock. That's the name of it. Yeah, they bought 2 years ago. And I was actually surprised. I mean, I thought I was going to have to call them, and I don't even have a phone number. I mean, we're dealing with, we sent it out certified, so they did sign for the income and expense statement when they got it, but they did fill out 2 years worth of information, which is great. So they're on time, and there won't be an issue. We just have to wait for the appraisal to come back and approve it. When Roy's turnaround will be really quick, I'm sure. Personal property business inspections are still ongoing. We did already receive a bill for that, but what we had already told RRC was because that came from one of the overlay transfers at the town meeting. I've got to check with Mike and Cheryl to see if that money is immediately available, if she already did the transfer, because Roy Bishop's appraisal will come out of there. I just got the 504 utility appraisals that RRC is doing, and we can review those at the next meeting. Those are coming out of there. The update to our mapping is coming out of there. So there's 5 different items that we need the money that was transferred to overlay surplus. I'm just not sure if that means it's available July 1st or if we can actually start paying those bills. I mean, it's not that far off.
And just to say, so number 6, personal property inspections for 2023 or FY 23 are business personal property.
Right.
And they have nothing to do with the personal property that the homeowners are reporting on their formal list.
No, absolutely nothing. It's a whole separate project that's happening at the same time.
So we're just inspecting businesses to see what they have for business personal property.
Correct. Yep. And again, the only time limit that we have with that is making sure that when the state is out for our certification, that I have what's going to happen is they're actually, because we're on a cloud system with them for our software, they're going to enter the data also. That's part of the contract. And then we actually sign off on each account. So I won't have to then do the data entry work. I mean, there could be, let's say, for example, Stockbridge Golf Club, the Red Lion Inn, there could be pages and pages of data that they're putting in, and then we'll be able to pull it from the cloud. I mean, it's a cloud service, and look at them that way.
Yeah,
but so far I haven't heard anything, unusual to report on that. It's going smoothly, which is good. Again, we should hold off on making any payment on that until we are satisfied with. I'm going to send an email to Brian, the owner of RRC, just to explain to him that there's 2 things in play. Number 1, we're not sure if we do know we have the money, but not sure if it's available until July 1. And at the same time, we should at least see something to make sure we're getting a report back. I think they've done 60 accounts. That's the last word that I had, which isn't bad, before we actually sign off on those bills.
So Michael, what was the cost of that approximately? One of the reasons why I asked is
Was it 6,000 for that?
Because
I'll have to look it up. I can't, it's somewhere in that range.
Because
between 4 and 6.
Because at the town meeting, it was on the warrant.
Okay.
Hiring for appraisals. Mm-hmm. And so the question was sort of posed, what is this for?
Oh, someone said, okay, I wasn't sure. I wasn't there.
Right. And so I think Gary said, this is to hire people to help appraise your homes.
No.
And
okay.
So that's not really.
No.
So again, what was on the warrant was to hire people such as what you're referring to do the inspections of the business personal property.
Yes.
To do.
Yep. I mean, technically they are appraising they're appraising the personal property valuation, but nothing to do with the real estate at all.
And the appraisals also were for like Ray Bishop to do the
Glendale power plant. Yep. And the
Solar.
The solar.
And then also, did that include numbers for?
Well, not the solar, the 504 utilities. The 504, which that just came in. We hired them last year to do the 504s. There's 3 of them. And that went without a hitch, actually, which was great. So they are appraisal services, but they're all for personal property. Because 504s are personal property, the Glendale Power is personal property. Not a single thing is related to real estate. Even all the real estate stuff we do in-house.
So we do the building.
Yeah, that's our responsibility. The personal property is still our responsibility. We will, make sure that when we see the final product, you guys are happy with it. We're all happy with it. I mean, we don't want these you don't want to hire a company to be doing exactly what we could have done in the first place. I mean, the whole point of especially number 6, the inspections these are experts. I mean, that's all they do is personal property. That's not all we do is personal property. So, I mean, and I won't pretend to be the expert on personal property. So to have a service do this where we know that, okay, they're valuing, let's say, a computer for this much, or this for the outside things that we've never been able to appraise properly, we're counting on them to give us that true number, or as close as you possibly possibly can. And personal property is you're talking about every single item out there has a value. It's very time consuming, and I'm going to be very curious to see the lists that come back from, and again, it's only going to be as good as the cooperation that we get from the businesses as well.
So when's the last time we did an appraisal on the business personal property?
Well, technically we do it every year, but that's based on form of lists that come through. And that's basically saying, I'm telling you,
right,
this is what this is worth. And I use the valuation system to plug that in, but there could be items that I'll be honest, I've never heard of in my life.
So when's the last time we paid for somebody to do the appraisal? That's my.
Never.
So we've never.
Nope.
So in theory, hopefully we are hoping we can pick up new business personal property that we've never seen before.
Absolutely.
And we can also hopefully educate the people or the businesses so that next year when they do their formal list, hopefully they will use this format.
Right. Yeah. And actually it'll give me a better idea of what to look for. So I mean, this is you always do want to see the end result be something that you can learn from, and I do. I mean, it's same thing with the solar and the 504s. I've gone through those appraisals with Joe Barberi at the state level, and the whole point of a service is once they're done with the service, we still have to be the ones responsible for it's the same thing if you're hiring out to do a full revaluation. Once, whether it's RRC or Patriots or Vision, those are appraisal companies that also happen to have a software program to go along with their service. Once they're out the door, we are still responsible for those valuations. If someone were to come in and say, I don't approve of this value, I would like you to explain this value. It's up to us to explain it, not to call the company up and say, can you please come here? And that's not what, they're doing a service for us, but we still have to have the knowledge and the know-how to go about and explain what was done and how they can go about appealing it if they choose to.
So are the businesses going to be provided with that form of list or that list back directly? Is RRAC giving them the results?
They are open to the public. We don't have it on a cloud. My service is on a cloud service. They can easily request it if they want it, and I can email the whole form to them. There's actually a little box in the software on the cloud. If I just put in their email address, it will send the list right to them. So they will have the opportunity. They won't have an opportunity to look at it when we're in reval. The only public disclosure that we have to do is with real estate. Personal property will be once the tax bills are issued, and if you want to see the list at that point or at any point once we have it, we'll probably have them, we have to have them back before August 1st. Anyone that owns a business can request it and we'll send it to them.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering because I've had to fill out these forms before on behalf of a business. And if I had something to base it off.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It would be very nice. So usually a lot of times I pull up my previous year and adjust it from there. So.
Yep. Actually, and that's happened a lot with the form of list that we sent out for the second homeowners.
Sure.
I've scanned in the fiscal 17 it was calendar 17 for fiscal 18. And once they get it, they've been so appreciative and say, oh, well, this is a jump off point. I can at least add or subtract what was on here. I wish we could do that every time, but that's 400 or more that we would have to send out, but we've sent out well over 100 this time around, and we're keeping track of all the ones that we have if people need it. And again, there's been some requests, can you send me the copy from 5 years ago? And we'll look and see there wasn't one filed 5 years ago. Yeah. And that's when you do, unfortunately, really have to just do a starting point. So we'll have something on file. Those are, we have the last 2 studies. So if someone does need them, and the actual printouts that we do for the personal property are permanent. So we have those in storage if someone needs one. Oh yeah, absolutely. Whenever someone would request it, we can get that to them. So number 7, I'm going into the sales analysis part of the certification. I really don't want to get into it too much, but we've talked about this before. There are going to be some severe changes. I mean, that there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Anyone that pays attention to the real estate market has to know that, at least from last year, because last year are ignore what might be happening now or happening in the next few months. But last year is our target year for the values that come out in the fall, and just the preliminary view of everything. Yeah, we'll know better in a few weeks, but when we probably have to wait until Joe Barberi reviews everything. But I'm sure there's going to be some big changes almost on every style.
But with that being said, so even if the assessments go up, assuming that the level, if spending was level, in theory, the assessments may go up, but the rate will go down. So just because.
Yes. It will.
So just because the assessments go up doesn't necessarily mean the ultimate that your tax that you pay each year is going to go up. The tax you pay is a combination of the assessment and the spending.
Yes, and if they go up, what I feel they're going to increase, which again I don't want to disclose it at the moment until I'm finished, then it should be maybe one of the biggest decreases we've ever seen in our tax rate.
So Mike, not that I don't want to press you on disclosing stuff you're not ready to do, but from a preliminary look, is the escalation in values across the board, or is it more concentrated in, say, lakefront property?
Oh, no, it's everywhere.
Just across the board?
The lakefront, we've always, I know the state is always keen on making me do as much as I possibly can to keep those, as realistic as they possibly are and can be around the bowl. And I've got maps with all the sales around it. And we do have plenty of sales, but the problem is that there's some that are so sporadic. And, those are the ones that you have to I'm going to try to keep as many of the sales in the study. I mean, we're talking 86 sales that we have. We usually have about 40. We have double the amount of sales that this is the most we've ever. I know that doesn't seem like a lot maybe to our audience, but that's a lot for Stockbridge. I mean, the 27 years that I've been here, never, ever have we had 86 sales in 1 year. Maybe 2 years. And then when you start weeding through them, you realize you're going to end up with maybe 38 to 40 sales that you submit to the state. 86 sales is the start off point. I'm not there yet as to which ones are truly going to make it into the study, but there are some that I just look at like, how is it possible to make this work? This was the most difficult, this will be the most difficult certification, I feel. The state is going to still they don't care in the end where they want to still make sure that you're between 90 and 110% of market value. Whatever you have to do to get there within their certification standards is what we have to do. But that means some drastic changes to the base rates for almost every style of property, and then some land changes as well. So I have no doubt there's going to be some severe changes around the bowl, easily. I mean, that will be more of a land change than a building change, and that will be segregated to that area if it's the land situation. But let's not rule out there could be some big increases in land values throughout the town as well. This is like unprecedented.
So for the clarification of people who might be listening, are you looking at FY 2023 or the calendar year 2022?
These values are for fiscal 23 using sales that happen in calendar year 21.
Okay, that's the clarification.
Yep. So right now, and we'll get this once we start doing our public disclosure in the fall, is people will say, well, wait a minute, things aren't selling now because the interest rates are going up. It doesn't matter what's happening right at this moment. It doesn't matter what's happening or what happened as of January 1st. It's everything prior to that will determine those bills that come out.
For the full calendar year.
Yep, and that's where, 86 sales last year, we still have a huge amount already halfway into this year. So, we could still, I don't think we'll hit what it was, last year. Last year was so crazy is a good word. For those, not only the number of sales, but the amount of those sales.
So, but to say it again, you said, so we're setting the fiscal tax rate for 23, but we're using the sales of 21.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so basically what's happening, so we're in an increasing market and we are using data that's quite old.
Yep.
And that in theory, once we reach the top, and if it does come back down the other side, we might have our rates continuing to go up a little bit.
Yes.
And then theoretically, it might take a little bit for the time for the price to go back down.
Absolutely.
It is old, but it's not a full year old. It's only 6 months old.
No, it's old. It's old. It's 2021.
No, you just said it's fiscal year 2021.
No, it's fiscal 23, but calendar year 21.
Calendar year
21.
Yeah.
So
the calendar year ended 6 months ago.
right.
So
It's the full year. It's that full.
But it's
12 months.
18 months old.
Right.
It's up to 18 months. It's between
No.
It's between 18 and 6 months.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. By time that bill is issued, I always say to anyone that's, inquiring about their valuation, which, again, we will go through that because we won't be doing actual in-house meetings to review value. We'll be sending out notices. And once those notices get sent out and then the phone calls start, it's up to me to explain what we just talked about. Fiscal 23, calendar year 21. It doesn't matter right now if all of a sudden the market collapses within the next few months. It is not going to affect those tax bills.
Right.
Next year, definitely. Because we'll have but next year will also be possibly 6 months of a great market, maybe 6 months of a soft market.
Yeah.
If there are two more big rate increases before the end of the year, I don't know if that stymies the market. I don't know if that stops.
Well, it might stymie the market globally, but Stockbridge
Is
seems
out
to be
yes
immune to
in a
that.
bubble.
Yeah.
It is.
So
Doug, as a real estate person, do you notice sales dropping off now that the sort of stock market is?
no, so the problem is that the only reason why sales are dropping off is lack of inventory. So it's not price, it's just, so sales certainly have probably dropped down, but it's just because there's only, like right now, if you were to do a search for what's available in Stockbridge, I think there's 7 houses for sale.
Wow.
Which is pretty much nothing.
Wow.
And
That is amazing.
so it's not necessarily because of prices have gone down or demand has gone down. It's just that there's no inventory for people to buy. So that will be affected. So when appraisers do appraisals for banks and stuff, they want to use data that's no older than 6 months old. So all I'm saying is that appraisers use really current information. We're using information that's a lot more dated than.
Because we're locked into that assessment date of January 1st. And that really is the key for everything. That's our date for ownership changes. That's our date for valuation changes. And if it takes 8 months to get a tax bill out, it's still based on the previous year.
So Michael, our target is always 100% of market value.
Yes. Yep.
But you say the state allows us to go from 90 to 100?
To 110%. And I'm not aware of any communities that go, you have to be very confident in where your tax rate's going to be and where your budget's going to be if you're going above 100%. But
Well, no, actually, I was thinking like, so let's say we knew that, and we don't know this, but let's just say that the market started to go down. We were at 100. Could we ratchet it down and say, hey, we know our appraisals are old. We know the market's decreasing. Could we go from 100% to 95%?
Yes.
To 90%?
Yep. You make that call.
And-
So I mean, we'd have to just make sure that other than being in a next year is going to be totally different. We're not in a certification year for anything. I mean, the personal property will be finished. The 5-year certification will be done, and the next one's not until another 5 years. So if anything, that would be the perfect time to consider really looking and seeing, should we be at 90% at least for this year? And that would alleviate some of the big sways in the valuation. There are time adjustments and trends that you can do as well. We've never done it here, and it gets very technical because of Stockbridge being so small. I mean, I don't have a real huge amount of data to do time adjustments. I would also think the other thing, that would play into this is Stockbridge market, like we said, it's unique. I mean, when it's there, it's definitely unique. And I mean, up my way in North Adams, I mean, maybe the interest rates going up wouldn't be that big of a factor here, but there's certainly a factor where I'm from. That can deter someone from saying, I can't afford a house now. So there's no way. Down here, do we see a lot of that? Maybe. I don't see that. So I mean, I think if there's an availability of homes, I don't think the increase in the rates is going to stop someone from purchasing here. It definitely would, up where I'm from, up north, it definitely has an impact. So we'll just have to wait and see, where the next 6 months, I every time the deed comes through, I mean, I cannot wait to see where we are assessment wise. And what will be the key is, will our assessments after this certification hold up to what we see for a full year after this next 6 months are passed? And that should be interesting. Like Doug said, there's not a lot out there.
But to say it again.
And there's not a lot of sales that are coming through like we were getting last year.
But to say it again, if the spending was level, and if the cherry sheet from the state was level, and if our assessments went up 20%, in theory, our rate could go down 20% to be a net effect, correct?
Yes. And what we should do is there should be a huge push by us to the selectmen and to Mike that we need to let it go as low as it can go, without any interference, I mean, and interference, I mean, should we be fiscally more responsible and keeping it level? I say, and I always say, coming from, an assessor's point of view, is let the tax rate go as low as it possibly can go if your values are going up, because it will help people. I mean, that's the way that the equation is supposed to work. And the way to get there and the way is to really look at your receipts, look at your revenue intake. And, my motto has always been, let the formula work the way it's supposed to work. Like you said, if our budget's not going to interfere with it and our assessments are higher than they've ever been, then the tax rate really should plummet. And let's hope it does. I mean, I'm sure it will. So the next thing is at our last meeting, we met with Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum Incorporated about the 2 Depot Street request for tax exempt status. I talked with Donna Brewer last week, and she was already aware of it. And she said to me that there is no immediate pressure to have a decision done, but what she did recommend, and I said I would talk to you guys about it, is we can actually send them, and she could send me a set of questions called interrogatories, which we would typically send to anyone that actually files with the appellate tax board. If it's a formal hearing, and we're not there yet, obviously, but it can be treated that way. It could be treated like it's an appellate tax board and we're getting ready for that case. And it doesn't matter which way you feel about it, whether it should be exempt or not. We can request from them as many questions as we want in written form, and she can put it together for us to have them, so we can have answers written down on file as to, you know, we can go a little bit further in depth than the last meeting if we choose to. She's not going to, she mentioned that there was an ATB opinion where a museum went to court because they were denied an exempt, a portion of their property was denied an exemption because of a gift shop that was there. Because the gift shop, even though they were advertising that they were part of the, the museum, it was privately run. And they were open some days, they weren't open some days. And so they had a service that was hired to run this gift shop. The appellate tax board said that did not fly, so that they could not, that the town was absolutely correct in putting them on the tax rolls. So, and I'm not saying that's exactly the same situation.
So you're saying it's a gift shop was operating within a museum, but the gift shop was an independent contractor. And so therefore, since it was an independent contractor, it was taxable.
Right. And again, that's only one opinion.
Was the revenue from that gift shop going to the museum or to the independent cat?
I don't know that, but I can request, Donna can probably pull that ATB opinion and we can see exactly what happened.
To know, I think.
We talked, yeah, we did talk.
I'm sure they were paying rent. They were paying rent to the establishment, just like actually now at the Red Lion.
Okay, if they were paying rent, if the private contractor was paying rent, that would indicate that they were keeping the revenue and that the museum was just benefiting from the rent. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, I can totally understand why that should not be.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to look at that opinion and see.
Yeah.
But I did mention to her that, you know, we had posed questions and I asked her to watch she may have watched it already and that's why she was aware of it, our last meeting, you know, about.
So just to follow up on that, with the scenic railroad then, if it was an independent contractor running the weddings or receptions or whatever, and the independent contractor was paying rent to the scenic railroad for that private purpose, then that would be comparable. However, if the independent contractor was just getting a fee and the revenue all went to the museum, then that would be a different situation, I think.
Yeah, I would think they would probably have to spell that out in the opinion. That was only one opinion that she mentioned. There's probably more, but she immediately brought that one up. But I did mention that we talked about, you know, how many hours are they going to be open? The fact that what was initially presented before you guys said something to them was not that they were going to have hours of operation or even anything to show people or present as a museum. And she says that's problematic as well, you know, and just appeasing the board or the town by saying, oh, well, we can open and have, you know, this and this and this available to the public. I mean, she was saying, was that their initial intent, or are they just doing that to fulfill what you guys are requesting? And so she said, there's a lot there for sure. She's like, I'm not the Board of Assessors. I can't make that decision for you, but I think it would be good to at least see these sample questions. And why not? Because, or she said you could basically wait until, the thing is, there's nothing that you guys sign off on that says, yes, this is taxable. Yes, this isn't. What decision you make is, do we change the use code on this property when the tax bill goes? Should there be a tax bill? Should there not be? If you left it alone and a tax bill went out, they file an application for an abatement, just like the these are treated very much the same way as an elderly exemption or all the other exemptions that the town offers. Even though they're filing for it when the bill goes out, it's really as of July 1st. So the same thing would be for this one. They would be applying for an abatement based on July 1st. And then you would come back and say, well, wait a minute, we've already met, we've already talked about this. And at that point, either approving the abatement or denying the abatement is you saying, we agree that this is tax exempt or this isn't tax exempt. She wasn't 100% sure on the details there, but that made sense to her completely. And she says, well, then if you deny it and they decide to go to the appellate tax board, you would be asking for interrogatories anyway.
So it's based on the usage as of July 1st of this year.
Yes.
So shouldn't we send out the interrogatories now saying, what is the use as of July 1st now?
Right.
So again, if we send the interrogatories out in October and they're answering it for what's going on in October, that's wrong.
Right.
So
yeah, I'm going to ask her this week to get those questions ready and send them to us.
Yeah, the question should be out, say, hey, here, what is occurring at the establishment as of July 1st?
Yes.
And because again, if they fill them out in October and it's based on what's happening in August or September, October,
Right.
It's probably not correct.
Yep. I'm going to call her back today. And, but she was very, aware of it and, you know, basically said, yes, I've seen this before. And I said, because I don't think we mentioned this. Remember when we were going through this with High Meadow? I don't think we had town council involved at that point. No. Not that I'm aware of. It certainly wasn't Donna. It might have been Ray Miaras, but that might have been a quick question.
They've paid their first half taxes?
I don't know.
Because they have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no.
They should have.
They're not abating. They haven't requested an abatement. They're submitting for the tax exempt. So in other words, I don't think that's a different.
Right. It would have been a second. They had asked if filing an exemption would mean not paying the second half bill. I said, no, that second half bill is just an extension. If you decide not to pay it in full, you're just going to get a reminder that there's half that's due.
Being still there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just going back to the whole conversation about the restaurant or the gift shop and the other thing, just as an aside, the Red Lion Inn does have 2 new tenants. The Pink Kitty, I think, is now run by an independent contractor.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then I think also the, where the
Country
Curtains was is
Yep.
independent contractor. So we do have 2 new.
And they're like a party planner, aren't they? I mean,
They're a florist gift shop.
Okay.
And so, but the thing is just for the
personal property.
we do have 2 new businesses in the Red Lion Inn that are not owned by the Red Lion Inn.
So that's where we got on that. I'm definitely going to ask her. Like I said, I've done my own interrogatories before. Typically, when you go to court under a formal procedure, you're allowed to ask, I believe it's 22 is the limit. Because I was involved in a court case many years ago where the homeowner was also a lawyer and his father was an attorney, and they sent me literally like 50, 60 questions. And I called Ray Miaras and I said, these are multi-tiered questions. I mean, and there's 60 of them. How many? This could take a year to do. I said, how many of these do we really have to answer? And I was told legally, you pick 20 to 22 questions that you can answer. So, I mean, can we even come up with 22 questions? I don't know, but there's some that I could come up with for sure, but I would like to see the ones that they typically send out in a case like this. But, you know, I don't think, because I had asked her, I said, geez, you know, at this point, are our hands tied with this, you know? And she said, absolutely not. I said, you're still in the process of, you know, should we, shouldn't we, you know, as far as gathering up all the information. But again, from what I saw at the last meeting, I just found that a lot of it was, they were directly answering questions based on what you wanted to hear. And that's just my opinion. Doesn't mean that's exactly what was going on, but
it would be interesting to know from her, you know, what is the magic percentage of operation?
I would say majority.
You know, I mean, it would seem to me like it would have to be 50% of the time, or 51% of the time, you'd have to be operating as a museum or a, something that proved that you're, the nonprofit that you
And that is
say
a
you are.
small space. I mean, I'm not sure what constitutes a museum and how much you have to have in it and what's available to the public. It's a little new to me. I mean,
I think if it's a museum, and as long as it's solely used as a museum, the museum doesn't need to be open, 80 hours a week. The museum has to be open or used solely for the use as a museum.
Right.
If they use the museum for 5 hours a week and they're doing events for 40 hours a week, that doesn't fly. If they're doing a museum for 5 hours a week for 52 weeks, that's 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. So again, I don't think it necessarily has to be like open, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 or Saturday and Sunday. I think it's, as long as the primary use is a nonprofit use,
I agree.
that would sort of satisfy me, but you just can't reverse it.
Right. And obviously I know their concern was staffing. I mean, you can't have a museum that is just completely,
Well, that's the other question,
unlocked doors where people can come and go.
Yeah. If it's a passive display, does that constitute a museum? I mean, because if that's the case, then, you could say any kind of billboard or whatever's down at the Park Street
Right.
complex is a museum because they have
That's right.
information on a,
Yeah, putting poster boards out on the side of the building would not justify
right.
the.
I think
don't
it's
think
got to be
so.
something that's interactive.
And those should be the questions, those
Yeah.
should be the what we target is, what really is the intent here? I mean, and what is the end result and what happens in between, for accessibility for the public and because that's what this is all about. I believe, if it's not, then it's basically any business saying, I want to be tax exempt. The public part of it is the big part of it, I would think, and what's being done and how it helps the community and, what service it provides as well. So I'll talk to her and I would just like to see the questions without it being too detailed, like how do we structure this? What do we look at? Believe me, just because I did it one time, I'm not that familiar with what should exactly be asked in a situation like this. But I will say that if it were to go to the appellate tax board, we would definitely have questions that come to us and questions that we would be asking, and they could be multi-tiered. And again, I don't want to create any, bad relationships of any kind. I mean, there's just a procedure that has to be done. And, every property that comes before you guys should be taken seriously if they're asked to be taken off the tax rolls. And that's exactly what we're doing. So let me get back to her and hopefully she can give me a copy of at least an idea of how we should structure these, how formal it has to be.
Well, on that subject, also, the Tavidian property.
That's on, I didn't put it on here, but that's another one.
Is an issue as to whether that still constitutes the pilot.
And that I need to find out
We need an update.
if they even paid their pilot. Because
Right.
again, I was told that
But I mean,
during
it's the
COVID,
select-
they didn't have to do it. I'm like,
Well,
how is that?
I think Kripalu and Tavidian need to report to the select board, and then they can report to us.
That's a good idea.
Since it's their bailiwick, we're like a support system, but it's their.
And I think one of the things that they should be discussing initially, and maybe we can talk about it too, is I understand that during COVID, businesses were shuttered and shut down, but we're out of COVID now. Is it possible to go back? Because this is a contract and get the money that we weren't given,
That's a
for the
question
last
for,
couple of years. I'm not
Travis.
sure about, the Tavidian Foundation. I will check with Erica to see if they've made, pilot, their signed pilot agreed payment. But I
even
can
if
almost
they
guarantee
have-
Crapallo has not.
Yeah, but even if they have, we would need
We
some.
still want to know the
Well, we
usage.
need some proof that, there was nonprofit,
Well, the purpose, I think
Yeah.
the purpose of that was to educate Armenian.
Yes,
so did they have the meetings, or did they have Zoom meetings or?
because just because you're under a signed pilot doesn't mean that you're still sending in your Form ABC, 3ABC every year. And if you're stating on there that this is what you're still doing, that's fine, but you still have to be doing it. And if you're doing that under a signed pilot, and I mean, pilots are one thing if someone wants a volunteer to send in, like the BSO, if they want to send in something, but a signed contract where we're guaranteed a certain amount every year. I get that COVID has interfered with the business activity of some of these, but.
Can it be
It's-
retroactively?
Right, exactly. And where is it that you're not supposed to pay that
It'd be
amount?
interesting to check with Boston, because they have a number of pilot contracts, what they did in terms of collecting fees during COVID, and whether,
Well,
if they did.
Yeah, that's it. That could,
Fees or whatever.
and I wonder if they had to get something in writing too, that they were allowing signed pilots
I think that
to
would
not be paid.
worth checking. Is that something you
Makes no sense.
could check, Mike, or would you prefer that I try to check on that?
If you want to check, that's fine. I mean, if you want, and or I'll talk to Donna too about that. Maybe she can
Well,
throw something at that as well. I mean, I will say I was a little shocked. Don't get me wrong. I understand businesses that were hammered and weren't able to open. But I always thought that if you're under a contract, you still have to uphold that contract one way or another. Even if it's a promise that you'll pay double the following year or triple, later on, it just, yeah, that didn't sit well with me.
I'll check with the Boston pilot.
Okay. And I'll check with Erica to see if we received that. Crapallo may have paid something. I wish we got notice of the payments. We don't get notice of any of those. I think it goes into the general fund. But I'll ask Erica if she can give me a list of the ones that have actually paid anything. But again, what's the purpose of going into a pilot program for 15 years if you can skip a few years?
Well, the thing is, I still am a little confused about Crapallo and their nonprofit status. I mean,
That's up in 2 years.
Crapallo, is it? 'Cause
Yes.
Crapallo used to be.
They have to come in and refile for that.
It used to be a religious organization,
Yeah,
and then they made the transition.
I wish you were on board when we went through this, because it's not the way that the board was fighting for it to be done. And maybe we should have been a little bit more upfront about that, because there were supposed to be certain things that were in that pilot where if they were to do work, take out permits, that it was reviewed by the board, not the select board, but by you guys. And then we could appropriately adjust the amount. That needs to happen. I mean, if it's going to go forward, and I'll pull both of those pilots and we can look at them further. But I believe the Crapallo one is up in a couple of years.
So again, it's the nonprofit status out of all of the taxation. It's not just the personal property or the business tax. It's also the rooms tax, meals tax.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, because they don't have to pay personal property on anything there as well.
and they don't have to pay room tax or meals tax, all of their guests. And so I know Canyon Ranch has expressed some concerns about the way
Yes.
they're being treated.
Yep, they were the ones that were expressing concerns when it was signed.
So in the public meeting before the select board when that was discussed. I remember Phil Heller speaking.
Yes, it was
saying
Phil.
that I represent Canyon Ranch. And Canyon Ranch is now competing with Kripalu, and particularly with their new building, which generated this pilot, because the new building is mainly for the higher end customers who want their private room and private bathroom and don't want to.
Yes, as sparse as they say they are, it's still very private.
And they do have one sort of room in that new building where they can have yoga classes and what have you, but primarily it's a residential facility. I also think Doug's point about the meals taxes.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be curious to see, I really don't know the ruling or the licensing needed behind the scenes for educational purposes, but it would be curious to see if.
Because that is what they're filed under now.
Yeah, so it'd be curious to
It's not
see.
religious, it's education.
Yep.
So it'd be curious to see if their educational paperwork is all up in order and blessed by everybody.
Yep.
If not, I think that the town should look at it closely when it comes up in 2 years.
Yeah, because do you remember? Because we put them right on, we actually put them on tax rolls. That's what triggered this whole thing. There wasn't an attempt to do a pilot before that. We put them on the tax rolls because the guru had left and we weren't convinced that it was a religion anymore, if it ever was, and put them on the tax rolls. Immediately heard from their lawyers. I mean, my head was spinning so fast. It was so quick. And that was the year that we picked up new growth because we put them back on the tax rolls. And historically, if this has never happened, Stockbridge was the one that created it, had our new growth taken away from us the following year when the pilot program was actually put into place. And they didn't even know how to do that at the state level. They had to literally have a software programmer come in because they didn't know how to deal with negative new growth. So, I mean, I never want to get in a situation like that again. I mean, it has to be something that if they're up for renewal, we need to look at it a year in advance and really, meet with town council, meet with the selectmen and find out, because for me to just change it and put it back on the tax rolls and create this whole situation of negative growth, we should not be doing that. I mean, we should go into it again with a year in advance, studying this, finding out really what is involved before their last couple of pilot payments are due.
Well,
So
go ahead.
I just say, so maybe these interrogatories that we get determined for the nonprofit status, maybe those should be sent out each and every year when we do
We could do that too.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
So-
I think the other thing is we just gotta, the select board is the driver of the pilots, All we are is the support.
Yep.
Back to your point when you were saying you were going to check with Erica, I believe, about the pilot payments. It'd be worth checking and seeing what nonprofits like Riverbrook and Austin Riggs paid.
Yes, I'd like to see a whole
Because they've been-
spreadsheet.
They generally do better than other not-for-profits, but did they maintain their usual payment or did they?
Riggs.
Because of COVID too?
Correct, yeah.
And then if you're also going to speak with Donna again, I would be curious to see, so let's say we have a nonprofit that's a nonprofit, we all agree in 2020, they sign a 10-year pilot. 3 years, 5 years down the road, they are changed their mission. They're no longer acting as they had previously.
That's what I wanted. That's right.
So really the question is, just because you have a signed pilot and your composition changes, you can be put back on the tax rolls, or how does that work with a pilot?
Right.
And that's-
Yeah, because we've never done that
Applicable
before.
right now to the Tavidian property.
Yeah, I mean, just because you have a signed pilot,
Because
if you're still not profit.
arguably, the old Fitzpatrick house right now is simply
What
on a
that
holding
is,
pattern.
of the old Fitzpatrick. Exactly. Yeah, should it be put back on the tax rolls?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely. I would think why not?
Well,
You
again,
know, I mean, it makes
but the
sense.
thing is, I think that the assessors approve if it's a nonprofit or not.
Yes,
Assuming it's a nonprofit, then it goes to the pilot. So even if there's a pilot.
and you're supposed to
signed,
sign the pilots as well.
yeah, so I think we are theoretically should be signing off that it's a nonprofit each and every year. And if it is a nonprofit that has a pilot, then the pilot kicks in. Otherwise, so they're either going to get hit with a tax bill, assuming we say that they're not nonprofit. If there is, we do say it's nonprofit, you go to the pilot, or if there's no pilot, then there's nothing paid. I think we have to declare it as a nonprofit before the pilot even kicks in. Because
Yes.
the pilot should be null and void if they're not nonprofit.
Yep. Have you seen, I mean, have you heard anything from the Tividian Foundation? No. I'll pull the 1B3 and the 3BC and take a look at that for our next meeting.
I've always heard rumors that the buildings are underutilized and may go to the market.
That way?
That they're
Oh my God.
underutilized and may be sold at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
And right then and there, that should void the pilot.
That's what I'm wondering, yeah.
I mean, how can it not? You still have to have ownership of that property. Because the new owners, whoever decide to, purchase that property,
question is-
they would have to reapply if they want to continue with any type of, if it's the same business or nonprofit use, they would have to apply as well.
Correct.
Okay, got a lot to talk about with her. We do have one person.
That might be for Steve. Is that the person recording on Steve's behalf?
Richard Rubin.
I don't know.
For CTSB?
Richard? Is there anyone out in the audience that has any questions?
Nope.
I guess not.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.